Now, this is one we're going to focus on. Task saturation. You can see all they had going on. This was a police department dealing with an active scene of a criminal running around with a weapon. The police wanted to do their job and get that data, that visual data on the subject, relay it, and apprehend or detain or arrest that suspect. That was their goal, okay? And that was their focus. These are uniformed police officers, by the way, who we respect, highly respect in Canada, are brave men and women in law enforcement. But task saturation was there was too much going on at once, to the point where they weren't able to function properly. They are unable to accept additional tasks and likely will not be able to perform current tasks at a high level. So you might be able to do it, but your level is going to be down here, okay? Up here is minimum safety. When you're task saturated, you're maybe doing it, but at a level down here. And that's what we can't have in the drone business. We always have to maintain minimum safety standards. A person who is task saturated may revert to what is known as tunnel vision, where they focus on one task to the exclusion of others. So when you're task saturated, a pilot is often task saturated, but a pilot is focusing completely on flying the aircraft, navigating, and communicating. And believe me, you as a pilot, that is enough of a workload right there in itself. The problem is when you have a police force operating a drone, or someone else who's in another specialty, like an engineer or a surveyor, they have other focuses which need attention as well. It goes on, what are these tasks that are required when piloting a remotely piloted aircraft? RPAs are normally controlled using a hand controller. Here we have right here, which controls the RPAs via the radio link signal. Most commercially available RPAs come with a built-in camera or the option to use for the users to select their own camera according to their needs or their sensors. The pilot is able to see the camera's output on a screen known as first-person view. So there's something that'll task saturate you right there, is focusing on your view. Even photographers, they're focusing on getting that right exposure value, the right aperture setting, the right shutter speed to get a really good money shot, if you will. There is another example of task saturation. Just more on task saturation. It says, during the occurrence flight, when the objective was to provide overwatch for the tactical team colleagues on the ground, the RPAS pilot was responsible for the following tasks. Controlling the RPAS. That's number one. Fly the aircraft, right? Monitor the video feed from the RPA using the data downlink. Monitoring communications on his police radio, okay? Including the communications between those actively involved on the operation, in the operation on the ground, the forces that are moving around or making progress or asking for information. Add to that, monitoring the handheld VHF for aircraft broadcasts, positional broadcasts. So now you have all that you're doing, and then monitoring the discussions and the fielding questions from the VRP members who are watching the video feed, maintaining communication with the visual observer according to the VRP guidance. So those were all the things going on. I would say there's a few more things that were missed out here. That would be the pilot's position and safety on the ground, and the pilot's situational awareness of the aircraft. Whenever you're moving a drone in airspace, you're always concerned about where that drone is traveling, i.e., is it going out of line of sight? Is it going near an obstacle? And in this case, is it going where aircraft are operating? Is there any of that going on? It all has to be maintained on top of that list we just read right there. And there's probably other things that I have not mentioned. How about checking on battery status on the aircraft? How about checking the Wi-Fi data link signals for interference, especially in an environment, a police environment where you have lots of Wi-Fi activity going on? That can mean interference. A pilot flying an aircraft always wants to maintain watch on the health of the radio signals so he wouldn't lose it in that type of a situation. And so here we read something also key, that the pilot did not recall hearing any transmissions on the VHF radio. Any aircraft in an airport circuit pattern always does what we call position reports or requests concerning where they are in the circuit pattern. And so the aircraft that collided with the drone would have certainly called downwind for landing onto the runway that they were on final approach for. And so if a pilot responsible, like a proper drone pilot, knew how to interpret that, they would certainly have understood that they have an aircraft flying onto final approach to the nearby airport. I would add the radio signal would have been crystal clear from the distance that they were operating from. And the collision could have been avoided. It says, although he had recruited a visual observer, he did not recall any ongoing communication with this person during the flight. So there you have it. The visual observer wasn't keeping an active watch on the drone and not reporting any collision hazards or safety risk issues. I would say it's more likely than not that the visual observer lost visual line of sight with it or didn't know where to scan. Keep in mind, when you're on the ground, and there's obstacles like trees around, you don't have to fly very far before the thing's out of sight, even though it's less than 200 meters away from you. So I think that's what happened. And so they were flying beyond visual line of sight at that time. And the pilot was saturated with the situation on the ground and didn't do the most important thing that you can do as a drone pilot. Keep your aircraft safe. That's the first thing. Fly the aircraft and keep it safe. First priority, okay? Then you go to navigation. Where am I and how can I take evasive action to bring the drone back so we can get VLOS on it? That's secondary. Always keep the aircraft safe. And in this case, it wasn't safe because it was on the approach path to a runway of an airport.